This is exactly what I've been telling everybody, and this video just proves my point. The world is going back to the Victorian age where everything is very multipolar. And let me just tell you right now, this is going to be so much worse than just the Cold War. In the Cold War, you just had to worry about two sides. There was only two major powers, the US or the Soviets. But now, instead of only having two superpowers, we've got to worry about 5. What could go wrong? They also all have nukes. It's kind of a key point that's going to make this far worse than the Cold War. And like I said, this video perfectly describes exactly what I've been talking about for so long. This is by Caspian Report.
A fitness instructor unknowingly records a military convoy rolling towards Myanmar's parliament to overthrow it.
This is still, it's literally going to go down in the history books. A TikTok dancer is going to go down in the history books. I bet. She's a fitness instructor.
Filmed in early 2021, it's the only known footage of the coup and the start of a devastating war. 4 years on, the violence remains relentless.
This has been going on for 4 years, a lot longer, but I think part of the reason why it's been happening for so long is it's been flying under the radar. And the thing is, I just visited Thailand. Thailand, the neighboring country here, very much affected by this conflict going on. In fact, we're going to talk about them.
Some 82,000 lives have been lost and another 3.2 million displaced, while the central government controls just a fifth of the country.
Just like that, this is another element that you normally didn't see in the Cold War, but this has been a theme for a while now when it comes to modern day civil wars that have occurred in the last like 25, 30 years. There's like dozens of different factions. I'm thinking about in Syria, I'm thinking about Iraq. There's all sorts of civil unrest that's happened throughout African countries as well. So now you have all of these different factions inside fighting for their own. Think about it like the Russian Civil War that took place after World War I, except much more miniaturized and in all countries. That's kind of how it goes now. So no longer just two sides, communists and capitalists.
All major ethnic groups are fighting one another. And in some areas, the breakdown is so complete that people don't even use the national currency. The resulting power vacuum has turned Myanmar into a hub for narcotics production, human trafficking, and weapons smuggling. It has also quietly become a regional proxy war, drawing in China, India, Russia, and the United States.
That's exactly what we're about to talk about. This is why this is such a key conflict. You got China, you got Russia. Those two nations, those two superpowers, they literally border Myanmar, so obviously they're both going to be playing a pretty big role here in a civil war. You got Russia involved, you got the US involved. The only power that I didn't talk about, the fifth power that I mentioned earlier, that's Europe. That's the EU, that's Europe, that's pretty much the European countries, obviously Western allied for now, but man, we here in the US are doing a very good job of trying to push them as far away from us as possible and trying to make them go their own way. And I feel like it's only a matter of time. Also note some of these other characters that are involved in this. So you have Cambodia, Indonesia, because those are regional powers as well. You got Thailand, who's right there. Even the Philippines and Malaysia, all of ASEAN is having to deal with this problem, and it's probably not going to clean itself up anytime soon.
These competing powers now shape what has become a widely recognized failed state.
Singapore as well, Brunei, Laos. Jeez.
May ultimately determine how long the conflict lasts. That's
this one graphic is basically proving my point why I wanted to make this video. Back in the day, you would have the communist-aligned world with the Soviets, obviously led by the Soviets and her allies, versus the USA. The US, NATO, or other, Western allied forces. Sometimes that's like Japan and South Korea. Now everyone has their own stakes involved. Even when you think that two sides might be working together, they're actually not. They're just conveniently kind of positioned to work together. For instance, the perfect example I can present to you is India and China. Everyone, for some reason, at least here in the US, thinks that those two powers are somewhat allied because of one thing: BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. That is just one example. BRICS is literally just an economic team that says, hey, screw the US dollar. They can agree that they can basically agree to say, screw the US dollar, we don't want that to be the de facto currency of the world. That's very easy to get a lot of the world to agree upon. But when you go any deeper than that, India and China have a massive rivalry that's going on. India and China are at each other's throats, literally fighting each other every day up there by Kashmir. that's a far bigger rivalry.
And they may ultimately determine how long the conflict lasts. That's how it works in geopolitics. What isn't stopped is studied and tweaked for the next war.
So this is a little bit different, not even a little bit. This is a lot different, more different than the Russian-Ukraine war, where the Russian-Ukraine war is pretty classic Cold War. You got Russia and her allies, which is basically just kind of Belarus, but, you know, India's kind of buying from Russia and China's kind of, you know, helping out. Oh, North Korea is a part of the Russian allied world now versus the West and NATO and everyone that's like helping to supply Ukraine. That's much more traditional. Myanmar is a perfect example of conflicts that we're very likely to see probably until the end of the century, until something drastically different happens, or until like a World War III breaks out and the world blows up. So here we go. We're jumping into it.
Myanmar is collapsing in real time. The closest thing to a central government is the State Security and Peace Commission led by General Min Aung Hlaing. Much of the country, however, has fallen outside the government's control. Patchworks of separatist strongholds now dominate vast areas, each pursuing its own political goals. In the north, the Kachin Independence Army seeks full autonomy for Kachin State, if not outright independence. In the west, the Arakan Army is pushing for a self-governed Rakhine nation with ambitions of breaking away entirely.
Bro, this is... I just hope this doesn't end up like Yugoslavia. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I'm seeing a map that's this fractured, which again, this is typically how things go. I don't even know what's going on in Syria right now, but obviously Syria had to deal with their civil war, which looked pretty much exactly kind of like this. I don't want to say exactly, but, you know, with a ton of different factions all fighting for different things going on. So it's not a guarantee that there's going to be like a balkanization of Myanmar. I would say that the chances of that are actually very, very unlikely still, but this map is kind of giving me that sort of vibe. Chin Land Council. I thought it said China Land Council.
In Chin State, various militias have turned against both the central government and one another, with each vying to represent a future independent Chin.
I wonder who is the Karens fighting for? Remember, there's an ethnic group inside of Myanmar that became very popular like 5 years ago because there's a people group called the Karens. They don't have bob haircuts. They aren't white ladies that complain about their restaurant bill or whatever like that.
Land. In the east, Karen and Karenni armed groups continued their long...
There they are, Karen National Liberation Army. There you go. Yeah, the Karens are mostly along here, a little bit in Thailand too, but they're on this mountain range.
...standing fight for ethnic homelands, while Shan State remains splintered between rival factions, some of which favor federal autonomy, others complete secession. Beyond these ethnic groups, the People's Defense Force, which was formed by the exiled civilian government, now operates across central and southern Myanmar. It is fighting to overthrow the military government and supposedly replace it with a federal democracy.
So this is interesting because you have, you know, this is kind of reminding me of Vietnam a little bit. You have a country in a part of Asia that maybe not that many people, I can almost guarantee you a lot of Americans have never heard of Myanmar. Probably a lot of people in general, I will say. I know that I've seen rates of like country recognition. Like there's literal time, like people go out and survey people and say, have you ever heard of the nation of Cambodia, for example? There's a lot of people that don't. Or Laos is maybe even an even bigger one. This whole area, when it comes to, you know, kind of the normie world, not us, you know, geography hyper-focused people, don't really know Myanmar too much. Maybe they've heard of Burma a bit more, the other naming system, but it's interesting because you have a place that not that many people know about, yet you have so many major powers fighting over this, and well, they're spending a lot of resources so that the outcome they want is the outcome that we see in the results.
Not rooted in any single ethnicity, its growing presence has strained relations with ethnic militias, many of whom reject the idea of any future union altogether. Meanwhile, foreign powers have steadily taken sides behind the scenes. They're arming proxies, funding factions, and shaping outcomes from the shadows.
And like I said, what was important about Myanmar is it borders 2 out of the 5 great powers. You have China and India. That is why this is actually way bigger than you might think. This is so much larger than I don't know. I don't want to throw some, but there's like conflicts in Africa where it's somewhere in the middle. Of course, everyone's got their fingers in the cookie jar. They're all kind of dipping in and trying to get the outcome that they want. But Myanmar's a much bigger deal because it has a huge population, and like I said, and we're going to get into it, the results of this civil war for China and India are massive. They can both lead to some very crucial things here, especially for China. We're going to get into it.
China, with its deep investments and strategic stakes, has the most to gain or lose.
Yes.
But Beijing can't fully back one side without risking blowback elsewhere. Instead, it has opted to play all sides on the ground.
This is important, obviously, for India as well, because India borders it. You don't want this failed state on your borders like this. However, there's a lot more at risk. There's a lot more that China has to lose here.
Hedging its bets, if you will. It supplies military hardware to the central government while turning a blind eye to Chinese-made weapons flowing to rebel factions. This balancing act has led to an unspoken rule in Myanmar. Despite ongoing hostilities, most armed groups avoid targeting Chinese assets such as pipelines, energy terminals, ports, and economic zones.
However, when will we see another outside power tell them to specifically target those Chinese assets? If the US wanted, they could maybe back a faction and say, hey, blow up this pipeline right here. I feel like that's got to be on the possible horizon. I mean, this has been going on for 4 years. They could possibly do it. That could raise tensions with China. China would obviously know that somebody's involved. It's either going to be the US or possibly India.
India has tried to copy China's balancing strategy, but has stumbled in the process. Its main focus has been securing the northeastern frontier, where separatist, nationalist, insurgent groups operate from inside Myanmar. These rebel groups oppose the Indian government and use Myanmar as a safe haven to launch attacks. To counter this, India has quietly cooperated with Myanmar's military leadership, sharing intelligence and carrying out cross-border operations.
It really feels like for India, they just want stability in the region. That's the biggest thing. China needs whatever side to come out on top to be Chinese allied. They need that. They cannot have like a Western allied Myanmar. They just don't want someone on their border that's going to be more allied to the USA, for example, which I think is unlikely, but they really cannot have that. India just doesn't want instability in the region.
For instance, in May 2025, Indian forces engaged a group of insurgents in Manipur near the Myanmar border. Later, in July, an Indian drone strike eliminated several separatist commanders inside Myanmar. These incidents underscore India's anxiety over regional spillover. However,
another thing you need to keep in mind is the fact that India and China have far more borders, land borders, with other nations from around the world. They're constantly having to watch what's going on with their neighbors because they've got so many. I guess you throw in Russia as well. The U.S. is where the U.S. is very lucky. We have two major neighbors, Canada and Mexico, and they're not very big threats to us. Myanmar is not a big threat necessarily to India and China, but you have one instability here, you throw more instability in another neighboring country, and then a third one, and all of that stuff could spill over into your nation.
Unlike China, India lacks strong ties with Myanmar's ethnic militias and has little economic leverage. America has taken a different approach. Rather than engaging directly, it has avoided arming the groups fighting the central government. Its support has been limited to non-lethal aid for the exiled civilian government, under which the People's Defense Force operates. Most likely though, Washington is providing more covert assistance than it publicly admits.
I would not put it past them. I would 100% not put it past America that we're doing something over there. Any sort of conflict you see around the world, America's going to have some stake in it. They're definitely doing something. We just don't know what it is.
At the same time, the United States has been urging Thailand to play.
The problem is, just like the Syrian civil war and so many other civil wars, we don't really know what faction to ally to. Because, even if you do kind of choose one side, once they, if you do help them gain power and take control of the country, who's to say that they're going to give a crap about you. You know what I'm saying? That's happened before in history as well.
A more active role in Myanmar, mindful that some within the Thai military sympathize with certain ethnic groups. Thailand, however, remains cautious. It has little interest in fueling instability in Myanmar, knowing it could easily spill across its borders.
This is a tough situation for Thailand. Obviously not one of the, I'm not including Thailand as a superpower here, but Thailand is deeply affected by the Myanmar civil war, and they have been for the last 4 years. You can actually find a lot of Burmese people in Thailand. I saw a lot myself that escaped Myanmar, and they're working, in Bangkok. You can just kind of generally see them. It's a very common thing.
Thus, for now, the most Thailand is willing to do is ignore the activities of the exiled People's Defense Force, many of whom operate from Thai soil, particularly around the border town of Mae Sot.
What is Thailand going to do? They were literally just at war with Cambodia not even that long ago. So Thailand's dealing with a lot right now. And Thailand is a tough one. Thailand is kind of a chameleon, I feel like, diplomatically. I think they're trying their best, which, if you look at their history, that's generally what they did. That's how they stayed independent. Thailand famously never being colonized, even though they were surrounded by the British and the French and the Dutch were in the region with Indonesia. So Thailand, I think, is just trying to remain like that, trying to stay a chameleon in the eyes of the diplomatic world. They want to be somewhat cool with China, but also cool with India. They want to make sure they don't want to piss the U.S. off too much. There's a ton of Russian people that have moved down to Thailand and are currently living in Thailand.
Lawmakers are also cautious about challenging China, given its grand strategic interests in the country.
Bangkok.
You see, Myanmar is...
It does feel, if I had to say China has... Well, if Thailand, I feel like Thailand does favor China somewhat. But they're not going to just ultimately pick that side. They're not going to become Chinese allied. Whereas there's a lot of because China needs a counteracting force, because Vietnam despises China, the Philippines despises China. Those are two nations that are relatively close to Thailand. So
China's only immediate neighbor that offers direct overland access to the Indian Ocean.
And this is why China really needs this, because it gets them to the Indian Ocean. It allows them to not have to necessarily ship their goods through the Strait of Malacca, for example, around Singapore. They don't have to go through that South China Sea, which is a very contentious point. Remember, of course, China exports a ton across the Pacific, like straight across to, obviously, the USA, to my home city of Long Beach and Los Angeles and San Francisco and things like that. But they still need to be able to get things into the Indian Ocean, obviously to go through the Suez if they want to get things to Europe, for example.
This route bypasses the South China Sea and the congested Strait of Malacca, where the US Navy could potentially disrupt shipping during a major conflict.
So you still want to be cool. You need Myanmar, just in case. Just in case things get a little dicey in that South China Sea as things continue to heat up. Or if you decide for whatever reason to invade Taiwan. You invade Taiwan, you're going to need alternatives to get your goods out, and going through Myanmar is a great example. Now, right now, it's probably not the greatest thing. You kind of got to be a little bit worried sending your goods through a civil war-torn country, but if a power comes and stabilizes the whole region, that's going to make things a lot easier.
This 1,700-kilometer corridor is vital, not just for exporting Chinese goods, but also for importing fossil fuels from the Middle East and minerals from Africa.
Because the only other place they can do this is with India, to get the goods straight through the Indian Ocean, straight to the Indian Ocean, and then the beyond world, East Africa, through the Suez and into the Mediterranean for the European nations. They'd have to go through India, and like I just said, India's got a big rivalry. We're going to talk about them too. Again, China and Russia are probably more closely allied than anyone. Well, no, I would say it goes U.S. and Europe. That's the closest alliance out of the 5 major powers that I've been talking about. Then it's probably China, Russia. But even then, there's more tension there. There's even tension between China and Russia. Right now, they're kind of friends because it's convenient. But let's get one thing real. If there's only 2 major superpowers, China and Russia will definitely get at each other's throats. Look at the Sino-Soviet split during the Cold War. there was a massive fracturing of the communist world.
That's why China has built oil and gas pipelines from the shores of the Bay of Bengal to its southern province of Yunnan, with plans to add highways and high-speed rail along the same route. As part of the plan, Chinese state-owned companies are working on two major projects in Rakhine State, a $7.3 billion deep water port at Kiok Phu and a $1.3 billion special economic zone that includes an oil and gas terminal.
Well, that pretty much gives you an answer gave me an answer why this civil war is still going on after 4 years. It seems very much like the outside powers would really not want Myanmar to... It's better that Myanmar is not stable than to be stable and slightly allied to China. I mean, China could probably buy off, let's be real, China could probably buy off anyone that comes into power, even if they are momentarily Western allied. China can just come in there with a bunch of cash and be like, hey, we're friends now. Here's $5 trillion or whatever like that. I'm going to build a bunch of high-speed rail through your country. So India probably doesn't want Myanmar to stabilize. The U.S. probably doesn't. I don't know if Russia and Europe even care. I mean, we're not even going to talk about Europe in this video.
Both projects sit at the southern end of the corridor. And so, for Beijing, there can be no half measures in Myanmar.
Come full circle.
By any measure, 1988 marked a turning point for Myanmar. A pro-democracy movement took to the streets of the capital, but was then swiftly and brutally crushed by the military. While the West imposed sanctions,
how a failed democracy uprising set the stage for Myanmar's future.
China reached out, boosting cross-border trade and selling over...
It's been 30 years since massive student-led uprisings in Myanmar. Interesting because that was about the same exact time of Tiananmen Square. So that's I have heard about the student, there was lots of, well, especially in the eastern side of the world, but yeah, there was lots of student protesting happening, mostly against communism, opening up the borders and things like that, countries.
$1 billion.
The demonstrations were met with a staggering violence, again, just like Tiananmen Square. That's interesting.
Dollars worth of tanks, artillery, armored.
Beijing supported Myanmar by providing easy loans and technical expertise, as well as much-needed arms sales that the generals used to beef up internal security, with $1 billion from China back in 1989. Funny year there, 1989. Followed until 1994. Another part of, we're not going to get into this, but obviously Myanmar used to be part of the British Raj. They have a connection to India and to Britain a bit more. And then China's been an ally, China's been bordering them for their entire history as well. So all this comes into place. Myanmar has a very interesting history when you look at it like that.
Vehicles, anti-aircraft systems, and naval vessels. By doing so, China became Myanmar's key foreign partner. Yet, despite growing ties, the relationship was never built on trust. The fiercely nationalistic Myanmar military remained uneasy about its heavy dependence on China for arms and supplies. Many officers resented how Beijing treated the country as a client state. So, to reduce its reliance on China...
Noticing a theme here that a lot of neighboring countries don't particularly like China all that much. If you border China, you're more than likely not going to love them. I mean, that's just what I'm saying. The one example being North Korea. Mongolia just tries to survive between Russia and China. But generally, a lot of their neighbors aren't massive fans, interestingly enough. Vietnam is a big one that comes to mind.
Myanmar began building defense ties with Russia. It bought MiG-29 fighter jets and Mi-35 helicopter gunships, both of which are still used to this day. This Russian-supplied air power has become increasingly crucial in recent years as government forces have struggled on the ground. Helicopter gunships now frequently attack rebel-controlled towns and villages across the country. Right or wrong, Russia has been instrumental to the central government in Myanmar. But with its attention...
I mean, not for a while. See, Russia's kind of got their hands full. I don't think Russia gives a crap about what happens here. I think they, maybe on the surface, want to be like, hey, China, hopefully it goes well for you, buddy. China keeps supplying us with military equipment and resources, and buying our oil and things like that, because their hands are full with Ukraine right now. But I don't think Russia really cares. But yes, Russia is interlinked with Myanmar. I mean, Russia's sold arms all around the world, just like China does, just like the US does.
And resources consumed by the war in Ukraine, it's unclear how much of that support still continues today. What we do know is this. While
I don't think Russia probably does too much in Myanmar. I don't think they're really worried about it that much. I mean, because you got to think, like, maybe Russia does want China to win out and get whatever their interest is. It comes out as the resulting winner in Myanmar. But Russia doesn't necessarily want the biggest and most powerful China on their border either. I mean, if China could get taken down a notch or two, I bet you anything secretly the Russians would absolutely love that, because Russia is very afraid of becoming a client state like Myanmar was angry about to China, because Russia looks big on a map, but they are nowhere near the same size, the same economic power, the same population size as China. Russia's got a ton of resources, but they don't even have like 10% of the amount of population that China has. I think that's about similar numbers in terms of economics too.
China and Russia cooperate closely in the Ukrainian battle space, they appear to be pursuing separate agendas in Myanmar. America, for its part, has responded by imposing sanctions on Myanmar's military government, targeting officials and their business interests. At the same time, a massive new US consulate complex budgeted at roughly $248.
That's crazy, because I really want to visit Chiang Mai one day, but obviously Chiang Mai is the biggest Thai city that is under threat of instability in Myanmar. Now, it's probably going to be fine. This has been a conflict that's been happening for 4 years, but you never know. A turning point could spill over, and that is the first major Thai city that would definitely be affected.
$8 million is being built to replace and expand the existing facility in the northern Thai city of Chiang Mai. The consulate is widely believed to be part of a broader effort to expand American intelligence capability,
to reinforce existing U.S. intelligence gathering capacity in northern Thailand, because obviously it's not too far away from China, it's not too far away from Myanmar. You're going to get Laos in there. Laos, I think, is kind of more Chinese allied, so you're definitely going to want to get some intelligence from that region of the world.
In the region. Once operational, Washington could use the new facility to supply intelligence to rebel factions and influence the course of the conflict. Elsewhere, there are indications the US may be deepening its involvement. Local sources claim the US is contemplating plans to establish a large supply base in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh to support insurgent groups like the Arakan Army and the Chin National Front. They also suggest the US could impose a no-fly zone over Rakhine State to neutralize the Myanmar Air Force from supporting its troops on the ground.
Oh, I'm sure they're playing so many we love playing war games. You want to play war games. The most famous war game that the US military is playing is obviously a Chinese invasion of Taiwan right now, but there's also tons of war games that have taken place for Iran. Like you have to be you have to plan for everything, every little thing. And let me tell you, the U.S. military certainly does that. There is somebody somewhere in an office, somewhere in the world, that is planning for every possibility, just in case.
Although these claims remain...
And other countries do it as well, but I think, especially China, but I'm thinking that the U.S. and China are probably the big ones. They're always planning for every possible scenario.
Unproven, the focus on Myanmar's western coast makes strategic sense. Establishing friendly or autonomous territories near the Indian and Bangladeshi borders would put pressure on China's overland corridor from Yunnan and threaten its access to the deep-water port at Kyaukpyu. However, while Washington works to undermine China's corridor, Beijing is working just as hard to entrench it. Since the coup, China has sold...
Too little too late for China to step up its military aid to Myanmar's junta. So Chinese supplier... It looks like China just probably wants the military to take back power. Or I don't really think China gives a crap. They already said they're playing both sides, so they come out on top. That's probably the best way for them to go about this strategy.
Over $260 million worth of weapons to the central government, while also quietly arming rebel groups, especially in the north. The bulk of these weapons has gone to the United Wa State Army, which in turn has supplied other rebel groups, including the Arakan army. By playing both sides, China has now become the sole external power able to broker peace. It recently helped negotiate a truce between some rebel groups in northern Shan state and the central government. And with the Arakan army gaining ground in Rakhine state,
I mean, again, China just wants stability. They don't really care what it is. So China brokering a peace is the exact position they want to be in. They want to be the ones that say, hey, this is over. This is now a stable country. Myanmar, boom, here's the government. Take charge. Just have some damn peace over here. And also let us start, building this rail. Whereas, like I said, now, we're starting to realize there's a lot of interest, outside interests that want to keep this thing just going. You just keep up that instability. Maybe India, maybe the USA, maybe even Russia. Who knows?
Thanks in part to United Wa state army supplied weapons, it's just a matter of time before China intervenes there too. If this plays out, Chinese interests will inevitably clash with American designs, and the ground between may well taste the whip twice.
So the only power that we didn't talk about here is Europe. Europe is not going to probably do much and care much about this. I mean, Europe, just like Russia, is much more focused on Ukraine. I mean, that's really the proxy war, the two superpowers that are playing out for the Ukrainian invasion. It's Europe and it's Russia, which that's why Russia wasn't really involved in this video too much. This is mainly a proxy war between India, China, and then the US is just kind of involved. Who knows how much they're involved. This also kind of shows, the US has huge stakes in obviously ending the war in Ukraine, but obviously Europe feels way deeper and they're more deeply tied to the war. They feel it's way more important for them that Ukraine wins. The Europeans, obviously. But yeah, Europe is not going to be doing much here, but it's just interesting, especially in the time that we're now living in Trump 2.0, because there has been so many Europeans, specifically from the EU and NATO, because I realize Russia is European, that have talked about maybe we should ally closer to China. I mean, this is a real thing that's happening. Europe is 100% considering maybe we should get closer to China, because we cannot trust America. Didn't France put up some mural of France? I thought Macron or someone put up some mural basically bashing the U.S. I mean, they're not happy about what's going on. They don't love being basically the U.S.'s little bro. That's kind of what they are right now. They're the U.S.'s little bro. So I could see in the future the one place that they could ally to, well, it could be India, but mainly China is their big one. Because geographically, it's all the way over there. I mean, Europe already buys a ton of things from China. They do not have even close to the amount of Chinese products that are embargoed, that are banned. I mean, they have the BYDs, and I think they have Huawei. I'm not 100%. It depends on the country. Again, Europe is a lot more divided. That out of all the superpowers, that's probably the most complicated, because you have the continent of Europe, but you also have the EU, but you also have NATO, but you also have the UK. So something's got to happen, because they're very splintered right now. But on a dime, I could see them switch and become a major playing force. I mean, it's inevitable in the future. They will be a force with the rest of the four. Myanmar is basically the Syria of Southeast Asia. That's basically what I was talking about here. Such a shame. I visited in 2016. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth. I would not doubt that. While not using the currency, there's essentially no government at that point. It's anarchy like Somalia. Oh, man. And look, a Myanmar ball. As from Myanmar, thank you for this video. We'll have to watch what happens. I mean, we might be coming closer and closer to a peace deal in Myanmar, but who knows? By the way, this is one of the big reasons why I wanted to visit China myself, and you can actually come with me to visit China. I'm doing a group trip. I want to learn way more about this part of the world, since I talk about it literally all the time. And my personal experience is I've been lucky to do a lot of traveling. I've just noticed the more I travel, the more I can really learn about a place. Like you can look on like Google Street View, you can play GeoGuessr, you can do a 4K walkthrough 2 hours at night and watch as people walk through a city or something like that, but you really can't fully understand a place, in my opinion, until you visit it. So I am hosting a group trip if you want to come with me. You can head over, use that link down below to travatrip.com. There's 3 more slots open for the early bird special, and then a couple more spots after that. But I'll see you next time. And a big thanks to my patrons this month. Drew's abandoned son from Alabama. Petition for Drew to make Hoi 4 ASMR Tingles version 2. Nolan. Alexander the Terrible. Nord Tyrol. Miglu the Goat. King Bear Hayes. Connor Pavlik. Frederick Tiblin. Carmel. Drew's Argentinian Trust Fund. Rip Grandpa. Douchebag. Luxembourg Lover. And Tambrin.